Welcome to the Wellness Realised podcast, where we discuss all things well-being related. I am your host and my name is Nadine McCabe, and I am the founder of EmpowerPlan, which is a unique and proactive well-being service provider for organisations and their employees. EmpowerPlan provides rapid, transformational therapy as well as standard counselling services for your staff. We also provide on-site, therapy-based well-being and development workshops, which are all inclusive and free to the organisations when they sign their employees up to an annual membership package. We are an EAP provider that is unique in our service offering and focus heavily on maintaining both mental and physical fitness of our members, whilst also developing life skills to enhance performance and prevent ill mental health. So thanks for joining us. Today we have got Samantha, who is going to talk to us about using herbs to relieve the symptoms of menopause. So thanks for joining us, Samantha. Would you like to tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Sam. I'm a medical herbalist and I've been qualified now for 2 or 3 years. We finished the degree in the middle of the pandemic, which was interesting. So yes, I've been developing my business now for 2 or 3 years, and I'm finding that I'm having a lot of women come to me at that stage of life where they're finding that there's not a lot of support out there for going through perimenopause and for menopause itself. And I think that there seems to be the menopause revolution, I think it's called, in Davina McCall's world. So there's a lot of talk out there at the moment about this kind of therapy. So it's something that, you know, I'm very interested in. I'm at that age as well. So it's nice to work with women who we're all going through the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it is great when you've got that connection with the people that you're working with. You mentioned there perimenopause. For those who don't really know the difference between menopause and perimenopause, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. Perimenopause is the kind of transition from being fertile and moving up towards the menopause stage. So this can take place as early as in your late 30s, which would be classed really as early menopause. But anywhere between late 30s and through your 40s is when it starts to begin. And you start to kind of see symptoms that you would also get in the menopause, and they might come for a little while and then back off, and you go back to what you feel is your normal cycle. Symptoms disappear and then they'll reappear again. So this is where the estrogen, which is the main female hormone in the body, begins to start to decline. So you start to maybe get symptoms where your menstruation and bleeding changes. It can change the length. So some might find that their periods are lighter and shorter. Some may find exactly the opposite, and they're heavier and longer. And it can start to affect mood, insomnia, and the famous hot flushes and the night sweats and things. So they can start to come in. But it's so important, I think, to realise that everybody is so different. I've not met one person that's the same as anybody else. All their symptoms, they change, both in their ferocity of how they come through and at the times and different ages. So everybody that I treat, and I'm sure other herbalists are the same, everybody's treated on their own merits and what they're going through. So as herbalists, we kind of treat the person and not the symptoms.
Right. Okay. So, in what way would you treat, like you say there, you treat the person rather than the symptoms? Everybody experiences symptoms in a different way, I suppose. So, how do you go about that? How would you treat a person differently based on their symptoms and how they're experiencing it?
So through a really detailed consultation. So if I had a lady telephone and want to make an appointment to discuss help where, I mean, some ladies don't go forward with herbal medicine. They just need some tweaks to their diet, different sleep hygiene. It can be different things, but many will have some herbal medicine or teas or capsules. So the consultation is a good anywhere between an hour and 2 hours. So we look at the person's life, their diet, their hydration. I've had many people come to me with headaches, and when you say, well, what do you drink in a day, and they say, well, 4 coffees.
Yeah.
So simple things like that, like adding some better hydration in. So the consultation's the really important part, really, where we
you've
can
got
look
some
at
coaching in there then, by the sounds of it as well, in terms of lifestyle changes and things like that.
Yeah, nutrition is super important. It can be that, they maybe need some supplements, it can be some vitamin D, or that, it can be all sorts of things. But the consultation is where you would find that out. And we look at all the systems in the body. So we would look at the cardiovascular system, look at their moods, look at when their periods started, when did their mothers begin, when did their mothers kind of go through menopause. That can all make a huge difference to people too. So we would look at everything as a huge holistic kind of ball, really. And then we look at the support that client or patient would need. So it depends where they're struggling. So some ladies might come because they only want help with hot flushes. They're finding that that's the biggest thing that they have to deal with. Whereas another person might come and say, I've got a lot of brain fog, my moods, I can't, keep my moods stable. They're fluctuating between some anxiety and some low mood. They might need their support there. So it's really changeable, and those symptoms change, depending on how the estrogen is in the body. That can have an impact on the progesterone as well, the testosterone. Us women have testosterone as well. So it is changeable. So what might help for a few months then might change, and it needs tweaking. So that's where the consultations are super important.
Great. So in terms of herbalism, do you want to explain to people who have maybe not, most people have heard of herbalism, and holistic methods and treatments are becoming ever more popular for people these days. They're wanting to put use more natural resources in their healing and development. So do you want to explain the science behind herbalism and how it actually works, and the benefits of what herbalism can bring for a person, not just who's experiencing symptoms from menopause, but other symptoms as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously we've had herbs and plants. They've been our medicine for millennia. That's all we've had until the NHS and penicillin came along 150 years ago. So it's got a huge history, and not all of it's good, but we're now beginning to develop science to prove that they have such a powerful impact on the human body. So I think that people are becoming more upset with side effects from conventional medicine. And I personally am not a herbalist that doesn't believe in conventional medicine. I think it has its place, but I believe that we can work together. So somebody who may need HRT, for example, might have a couple of side effects where the herbs can help the side effects, but that person really does need HRT. And I think it's just getting the balance right on an individual basis. So I think for that reason, as you say, people are becoming more open to the idea of using more natural therapies, looking more at nutrition and lifestyle, to see that sometimes just those few changes and additions or removal of certain things in diets can have a huge impact. So we train for 3 years in a degree level, and we train and look at the science of the plants, the science of how that acts in a human body. So we're not just learning how the human body works, we have to learn how the plants work within that too. And there's certain constituents, ingredients that are in the plants that have different effects. So they can have effects on directly on hormones, but they too, for me, because I'm a healer as well and also a psychic, so I build a picture of what the plant can do for each person, really. And we would use several plants in one medicine quite often. Some people don't, they prefer to use one, but I think the general consensus these days is we would use maybe 7 different plants that work really well together. So it can help, say there'd be a couple of plants in there to help maybe balance the hormones and try, so the people aren't feeling that the estrogen is having such an impact, support the adrenals, because they then take a step forward as the estrogen and ovaries begin to lessen. But then also you can add things in there to help support them in their fatigue, say, and their mood. So it's so vast, it's really hard to get into a small podcast per se, but yes, I mean the symptoms that women experience and go through is a natural progression, but I think over the years we're beginning to now see that, you know, we need some support in this area, and there's a lot of plant-based therapy that can help that.
What form do the medicines that you produce take? Are they predominantly teas? How are they administered to your patients?
So I like teas and tinctures. Tinctures are where the plant is steeped in alcohol, so it's ethanol. You can do vodka and brandy, but they need to be very high quality, and they are steeped for a certain length of time. So the constituents, the alcohol is pulling those constituents, the good ingredients out of the plant. So they become then a tincture, which is what we would mix into a bottle, and you would take 5 mils 3 times a day in a little water, just as you would like any medicine in a little cup. Right. I love teas. So I have a little company called Hedgerow Botanicals, and I'm starting to build teas that I can sell out off the shelf. So aside from being able to do personal prescriptions for people, it's nice to be able to go and just think, well, I'm just going to try these teas.
What sort of herbs are going into those teas then? What kind of plants do you use?
So for menopause that's what we're talking about. I have a tea that I have Lady's Mantle on, which is Alchemilla vulgaris, which is a beautiful tea. She's one of my personal favorites. Sage is also one that people going through the menopause may have heard of, and black cohosh, that can go in there as well. But it's about mixing the teas with things that taste nice too. There's no point giving a really bitter tea to somebody if they don't like that thing and they're not going to drink it. So I often use mints and gingers and lemons in there too to make it taste nice. I think that's really important. I've learned that the hard way, giving people bitter teas and they're like, there's no way I'm
getting that banana medicine from your doctor.
Yeah. And it's the same with tinctures. You know, some people just haven't got the palate. So capsules can be helpful. I don't do a lot of capsules. I've not had much call for it, but a lot of herbalists can do capsules and suppositories. You know, vaginal dryness in menopause is a huge issue for some women, and you can get suppositories to help with that kind of thing that come in a capsule form as well.
Right, lovely. So what kind of issues are the ladies that are coming to you with menopause describing to you? What kind of issues can come in a young woman's life if they're going through this phase in their lifetime?
Many. It's huge. And again, various. But the main ones that most people would have heard about is heat, the hot flushes, hot flashes and sweats, especially at night.
What kind of herbs would you generally use to help someone who's suffering with a lot of hot flushes?
Well, there's a few that you can look at. So, and lots of tips as well about keeping yourself cool and especially at night. But the main one really that I found is quite useful is making a sage tea. So using some dried sage, of good quality sage, and popping it in some water, making a tea, but then leaving it to cool overnight. So you could make a flask and then the next day drinking it cool. So it's a cooling herb anyway. It is a little bitter, but as I say to many people, your palate does change once you get used to having them. So if you can stay with it, it's really, really helpful. It can also be used within a tincture. So if you prefer not to have tea, some people don't like herbal teas, it can be put in the medicine that way as well. Black cohosh, that's one a lot of people have heard about as well. I've heard a lot of people say, well, I've used that, I've bought that from Holland and Barrett, say, other places are available, and it didn't work. But what's really important, I think, with any of these things that you can buy off the shelf is they sometimes get a bad name because they're often filled with fillers. And also the dosage is really important, which is why working with somebody who has knowledge in that area and can see, some people might have 2 hot flushes a day and only need a small amount, whereas somebody, I think the worst one I had was having 25-30 hot flushes a day. It was literally just ruling her life, and with it she was sweating too, which is an awful experience, because if you're working in an industry, in an office, you know, as a powerful woman, and all of a sudden you're coming over, you know, it's really difficult to manage. So wild yam, Diascorea, that's another one that people have heard of. But there's lots and lots of herbs that are cooling. So we often work with plants that we are aware that would create heat within the body, herbs that create coolness, because we often have a lot of heat trapped in the body as we get older. You know, many people have been through traumatic experiences, grief, breakups, all sorts of things. You know, we've had lots of experiences by the time we get in our 40s, and that can sometimes create some false heat and some tension. So it's then also working with herbs that are going to help support the tension as well.
Yeah, I tend to generate a lot of heat in my body, to be fair. I used to go quite regularly for shiatsu massage, and during those sessions they're obviously working with different pressure points in the body and different chakras, I suppose. And I tended to generate, by the end of the session, there was a lot of heat that was sort of coming out. My skin would be red, especially around my chest area. I had a lot of heart heat. But yeah, heat is generally an element that tends to come out with me quite a bit. So
yeah, for sure. And acupuncture is really good for that too, a kind of, especially if it's liver heat. And you know, I'm not an acupuncturist, but I've had acupuncture for heat, and especially if women have thyroid problems, you know, that's really common to find. Especially it's more common in women to have a thyroid imbalance, and that can create feelings of heat or feeling cold, and it's hard to balance your temperature. But there's recently been, I don't know, I'm sure many people watched Davina with the menopause. Did you watch that?
I've not watched it, no, but please do tell us all about it.
Very, very interesting. And she's been talking to 2 ladies in America who have done lots and lots of research. And although the hormones have quite a lot of impact, obviously the hormones are regulated by the brain, you know, the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands and things. And so they've kind of looked at lots of research that are proving that because this is taking place in the brain, this is where a lot of the heat is generated, in this area. And because that also links with the pituitary glands that are in the brain, that's why a lot of people get brain fog. So it's been really interesting. So anybody who's really interested in learning more about the menopause, that was a super watch if you're looking at the scientific side of things. So they're trying to make some plant-based kind of HRT, really. But they also advocated on there, I haven't done any personal research, I'd just like to say, but their advice was to start treatment for more perimenopausal time, rather than leaving it right until you're in the middle of menopause and then you're really struggling, because they've seen some links with some studies that they've done that most people who have Alzheimer's are women. More women get Alzheimer's than men, and they're finding it's linked with menopause. And some of the symptoms in there, again, I haven't done the research, I only watched the program, but what they were saying did make some sense. And as women, we just power through, don't we? We just, we dig deep and we push through. We don't like to ask for any help. And it's about saying, do you know what, I might only be 42 or whatever age, but something doesn't feel right. My body's changing and I kind of need some support. And a lot of GPs I know are struggling to get hold of HRT at the moment. There's this shortage that's about, but also some GPs like to know that they're missing their periods. So when you move between perimenopause and menopause, you're not classed as being in menopause until you've missed 12 consecutive periods. So you've not had a period for over a year, and that's when you're classed as being in menopause. And some GPs, not all, prefer that to have taken place before they will then look at treatment. But these ladies that were doing the research, were saying that we need help much earlier. Some women have it so bad they're losing their jobs, their moods are changing, so they're moving into deep depression, major anxiety, brain fog. They're powerful women in powerful jobs, they can't think clearly, and they feel they're losing their mind.
I suppose it affects their relationships as well. That people don't generally, especially if a lady's experiencing menopause at a younger age, people tend to associate menopause with older women in sort of midlife, whereas it can happen much younger for some people. And people just generally don't understand how that can have an effect on you in terms of your mood, in terms of your physical sensations as to what's happening in your body and your mind and what's happening in your mind. And that misunderstanding or that lack of understanding can cause a disconnect in relationships. Yeah,
it can, definitely. And then if you throw into that the loss of libido in the middle of menopause, and your partner takes it personally because they don't understand either, you haven't got you've got brain fog, you don't know what's going on, and it can be messy. So I think women really need supporting and holding and nurturing and loving through this period. And it should be a time that's welcomed. Tribal medicine, this is a real honor to move from motherhood and being fertile into what we think of as the crone stage, and becoming empowered in your own right. And I think that a lot of women need to know that they're seen.
Yeah, because you don't get taught it as a child, as a young girl growing up, and you get the sex education now at school, and that sex education, it talks to young girls about what's happening to their body, periods, why it happens, what you go through. So you get taught from school all about that particular issue. You get told from your mum when you start to go through it. You have your little talks with your family, and your peers. There's a lot of education surrounding periods starting, but there's zero education about when that phase of your life comes to an end. It's kind of like a taboo subject in workplaces, in your family life, even with women. It's kind of seen as there's that stigma around it, that it's something to be embarrassed about, that you've got to that stage in your life that, oh my God, I'm going through menopause. It means that in some way you get into to the end stages of your life, and it's kind of that stigma surrounding it that causes huge issues and causes that silence. And if women had that education about, right, okay, these are the possible symptoms that you could experience during perimenopause, these are the symptoms that you would experience going through menopause completely. If they had that knowledge, you'd be able to gain that self-awareness about recognizing when those symptoms start coming in. And then obviously you can counteract that with treatment from people such as yourself.
For sure, yes. And I think it's important to have, like-minded people around as well. We need to talk about it. Like you say, it is a bit of a taboo, and especially if it's an embarrassing symptom. A lot of women suffer with urinary incontinence or, frequency needing the toilet more. And, I wasn't aware that that was a problem within this until I became a herbalist and researched it more. And, the thought of thinking, oh my gosh, I can't go out, or, what am I going to do? It changes somebody's life. And I think that's wrong when we're only halfway through our lives, and we need to be empowered within that. And, like I said, held and supported while we transition through it. And if we were more educated, we'd be able to talk to our partners easier about it as well, so they know what to expect. But I think that working with plants can be so mind altering. It changes things in such a deep way, and they can just help in lots of different ways, which is, it's not just, oh, well, we'll just give a black co-wash. It's much more complex than that, which is why you will get better results from seeing a herbalist and building a bigger picture. So we can build in help to look around the symptoms. But I'm treating you, Nadine. I'm not treating that hot flush. I'm treating you as a person, and we're going to work together to enrich your life and make this an easier process.
Yeah. So we've spoken a lot about women that go through menopause. Have you heard much about the male menopause and how men can experience similar symptoms?
I have. Again, it's not something I've had called to research. I'm not really sure what my view on it is. I think men do go through emotional changes, and I think calling it the menopause for a man is maybe the wrong way of doing it. But I do think that men also, I think when we get to middle age, we go through a time of kind of reviewing and evaluating our lives, don't we? What have we done? The children are grown up now. And it is a time to kind of look back, which is why they call it midlife crisis and things like which again is termed so wrong. It should be, again, a midlife honouring. Right, we've achieved this. Most people want a home and a family and want to get married, holiday once a year. That's generally what society tells us to do. And not all of us are like that. I'm not saying we are, but that's generally how people live their lives. They're building a business. So I think it's the same for a man. They get to this stage where children are leaving. You've now got another, hopefully 40, 50 years ahead of you. What do we want to do with that? And it's a big question, because most of us don't know, men and women. And I think we as a society and as human beings, it's a natural progression to reach that stage. To call it the menopause, I personally think is maybe the wrong word. But yes, men need to be honoured in that stage as well.
Yeah, I mean their hormone levels alter as they get older as well, don't they? There's certain things that are happening within their physical body. Their hormones are less required, just as much as a woman's are as they get into later stages. And I think it's important, like you say, it's that education and just educating people that as you get to that stage in life, that these are the kind of things that could happen, and learning to recognize them.
Yeah, because I think men are probably even more embarrassed than a woman is to come forward and say, look, I might be struggling with my libido a little, or I can't function as well as I used to in a sexual way, or I'm feeling a bit low, my life's changing and I don't really know how to cope with it. And I find that, again, we have to be open and say, look, okay, well, you just need some support. We all do. I do, I see people. I have regular Reiki sessions, and I use my own herbs, obviously, but I have regular acupuncture and things, because we all we're here to support one another. We're supposed to be a community where we all reach out to one another. And I think over the years that's disappeared, and that's really sad, but I'd like to think that maybe we can all play a part in bringing some of that back.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of advice for ladies who may be getting to that stage in their life and then maybe starting to experience some symptoms, what would be the advice that you would give someone going through that?
Be kind to yourself is the first one. Don't be hard on yourself. I think we have a tendency to beat on ourselves sometimes. We're super hard on ourselves. Why is this happening? What have I done wrong? But loving yourself and saying, okay, there's some changes here, then kind of looking at the simple things first. So movement and exercise is super important. And that isn't to say you need to go beat it out in a gym, but being outside, some fresh air, 15-20 minutes a day.
Back to nature.
Yeah, for sure, is super important. Check your blood levels, go to the GP, check your vitamin D levels, you know, check your iron and your B12 and things like that. And just check that that's not, you know, low, because they do drop and our absorption of them changes as we get older. So that's also a good place to start from. Looking at your diet. You know, none of us want to. I'm the same, but checking your diet. Are we bread based? Are we eating a lot of wheat? Are we consuming a lot of dairy? You know, does it make a difference if we don't? For some, no difference whatsoever, but for some, yes. So trying to incorporate lots of fruit and veg, you know, smoothies and things like that. And just, like I said, just being kind to yourself. So if those few things don't make any difference, of course you can nip to any, even supermarkets now have loads of different brands of supplements, and trying, if you wanted to try some off the shelf things first, and if that doesn't work and it doesn't support, then see a health practitioner who can help, such as myself as a herbalist. There's many in Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, and many of us now do online. You don't have to be sat in the room with us. I think that's one good thing that's come out of COVID. We can reach a much wider audience.
Yeah.
Some people prefer face-to-face, and I still do that, but I'll work however the client wants to work. Or seeing your GP. You know, if you're really at a low ebb, you know, don't suffer in silence, you know, get some support. There's also the British Menopause Society online. They have lots and lots of advice on there, but don't sit there questioning. You know, get some support from somewhere.
Yeah, there's certainly some great support groups out there, and even like social media now, you can actually join different Facebook groups where there's other women talking about those symptoms, and you kind of get that sense of community from forums that are all discussing these things that you're experiencing as well. It kind of gives you that sense of community, that you're not alone, and gives you that added confidence to start doing something about it and to start putting those changes in, and that way of accepting that these things are actually happening as well. So definitely forums and those kind of websites and communities that you can reach out to are great places, especially if you can't get out as well and you're not really confident in going and sitting and talking to somebody about it, such as your GP.
Yeah, definitely. It's nice to feel like you say you've got some support and you're not alone, and other people are feeling exactly the same as you. That can just take a load off people's mind to start with. So yeah, they're super important. I mean, Facebook's got millions of them. So yeah, it's free advice, but always listen to your intuition. You know, a lot of people give advice who maybe aren't trained. So just, you know, listen to your own intuition as well. If it feels right, you know, do your own research, and just listen to yourself and your own needs.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners with regards to the work that you do?
Well, I mean, I cover lots of things. I work with lots of different people. Some of them I work on a spiritual level. Some of them I work on a physical and mental. So I'm kind of beginning to write lots of courses to help people in lots of different areas, menopause being one of them. But I do lots of healings as Reiki, and also some shamanic therapies that I do. And I'm also a medium, so I often work with spirit in all of the work I do. So even in herbal medicine, I will be working with my guides and my spiritual team to ensure that this person's given the right medicine and what's going to suit them. So I think my main point is that I wouldn't want anybody to feel alone. Anybody that's struggling in anything, I'm always up for a conversation. I do free discovery telephone calls with no obligation if someone wants to see if we could work together. But there are lots of herbalists out there as well, and
what
other
about
healers.
the shamanic healing that you've just mentioned? Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Well, shamanic healing is, again, ancient. It's been used for millennia, and there's a bit of stigma attached to shamanic healing. I tend to find that the shamanic healing gives a much wider varying healing. So my healings you would get all from. So I do hands-on healing, which is the Reiki and the energy healing, but then if I'm guided to by spirit, we can work on other matters such as empowerment, and power retrieval, where we go through trauma. Most people have had some kind of trauma or grief. Even pregnancy for some women can be really traumatic. So things like that, we tend to lose a little bit of our power, maybe lose a bit of our soul and our energy, and it needs replacing. And it isn't the old energy that's lost, it's about helping women refine, and men refine themselves. So if somebody feels that they've lost their confidence, I'm here to try and help them rebuild that. If they've lost their joy for life, I'm here to try and help them find that again. If they feel they can't love openly anymore because they've been hurt, well, let's work on that then. So it's whatever the patient or client needs, but it just works at a very deep level, so it can clear away and help move forward. So we often get stuck in that traumatic cycle, and the way our minds work, we can't sometimes free ourselves. So I work a lot with EFT. I do a lot of tapping. That can be super helpful as well. So that's working on the meridian and acupressure points to kind of remove trauma that might be held within our energy and within our body, so we can clear it that way too. So there's lots of little things I kind of I'm guided to change.
You really do have lots of tools in your toolbox to help someone who comes forward for some assistance. Then that sounds fabulous.
I try.
Well, thanks for joining us, Samantha, and I'm sure our listeners have gained a lot of useful insight about how herbs can be of assistance, and gives them an insight into what's available for them if they are actually struggling with menopause at the moment in their own life. So thanks for sharing your insight with us today. It's been a delight having you on the show.
Thank you. Yes, it's been great. Thank you for having me.